We do our lesson in English, yes?
Yeah, we try.
Okay. If you have any problems, just tell me. I'll try to do my best. Sometimes I talk fast, so just stop me, okay? So welcome back, everyone. I'm Karoline, and today we're talking about Native Americans. I am not an expert on Native American culture. I'm not an expert on at any, I can give you just we're going to do a simple lesson today, talking about some of the issues, but of course, I have a lesson prepared that I will share with you at the end of our series of lessons, and then you can go deeper into any of these things that we're talking about. I'm sure that you've done your own reading and research and maybe even visited important places for the indigenous peoples in America. Maybe you visited a reservation. I hope if you haven't, you will, because there's a lot of really interesting culture happening in with rediscovering, or at least for white people, starting to understand better the real history of what happened in the United States and the tragic aspect of what the white Americans, European Americans, however we want to call them, the unfairness of how Native Americans were treated as well. So we're going to kind of touch on some of those things, and I'm going to share the lesson with you in a moment. But I think it's an interesting moment to talk about Native Americans, especially because on Thursday of this week, I believe, is it this week? Yeah, it should be, if this is the 4th Thursday of November, is Thanksgiving, il giorno di ringraziamento. And in America, that is the holiday where we eat the turkey, right? The big giant turkey. Now, this is also a holiday that in America was kind of marketed to tell a certain story. And it was marketed to tell a very happy story, but was not really based on true facts. In fact, the story of Thanksgiving is that it was a celebration between the Native Americans and the first European settlers in America, to thank the Native Americans who helped them survive the first winter, okay? Because we knew that at that time, if you could survive 1 year in America without dying, you had a very high probability of continuing the next year and the next year. The problem with the first European Americans in America was learning how to use the land correctly, becoming farmers, and taking advantage of the crops that they could grow on that land. So the Native Americans were fundamental for that. The problem is that now many of the Native Americans say we never should have helped those people, because after that, that's when all the tragedy started. So the version that I grew up with learning at school was that there was this great friendship between the white people and the Native Americans. But we know now, of course, and through looking at things from a different perspective, that that was not the case. Okay, so even now, Thanksgiving is it's a problematic holiday on one hand, because when you look at what it's supposed to be celebrating, it's problematic. On the other hand, for many Americans, including myself, I have to admit that I really love Thanksgiving, not for that part of it, but for the emphasis that it has on being thankful for what you have. So it is a day with no gifts, no presents. It's a day of just being with your family, eating good food, and being thankful. Okay, so I say this knowing full well that Thanksgiving is a problematic holiday for many people because of the real historical link, which was basically that it's kind of the celebrates a starting point for white colonialism in America, which would completely upset the indigenous populations from there forward. So I'm going to share with you my lesson. Oh, good. Oh, wait, I need to, Simone, if you're there, I can't share my screen. Let me write a quick message because I need to share my screen, but I need permission. One moment here. Simone, c'è?
No.
Non c'è. Okay, he told me to just tell him. Okay. Okay, just wrote to Simone. Hopefully I will be able to share my screen. This is a disabled participant screen sharing. Okay, so we'll wait for him for a moment, but he should be able to change the settings so that we can do that. Because one of the things we're going to talk about today is just naming. Okay, we're going to talk about names and maps. Okay, so those are the two things I want to emphasize today. Also talk about the United States Poet Laureate, who's the first Native American Poet Laureate, and how she is working on remapping the United States through poetry. So those are the things I want to share with you. But if I can't share my screen, it's going to be a little bit difficult for me. So I'm just going to wait for Simone. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you a question. Are you interested in Native American culture? Have you visited someplace? Is there anyone here who really, because there are many people who are very connected to the Native American way of thinking and being. Is there anyone present who feels that way?
I think it was a reservation because Mountain Valley is a Navajo reservation, I think.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you've been there. Nice.
Yeah, I was there, and there were Navajo people. They were scouts. We were tourists. They were the scouts. No, we visited the Mountain Valley, John for View, and so on. No? And we spoke with them.
When did you visit?
In Mountain Valley in 1992.
1992. Nice.
1992.
Was it a good experience for you?
Yeah. I did a great trip in America with the bus from New York to Los Angeles with the bus, 2 weeks.
That's a long time to sit. Very long time to sit. How many days was your trip?
No, I told you, 2 weeks. 3 weeks trip.
3 weeks. Okay, I didn't hear the length of time. Sorry.
It is difficult to understand here. The audio is not perfect. Yeah, I remained a few days in New York, and with the bus till Los Angeles, and we stopped in the Monument Valley. No? It was nice, yeah. It was a reservation.
Nice, very nice.
The only contact it was there.
Okay, you should see my screen now, correct? You see it?
An envelope. There is an envelope.
Excuse me?
There is an envelope here, I think.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Can you repeat that?
We are seeing airmail envelope, I think.
Perfect. Okay, good. So you see an airmail envelope. That's always my first page for my lesson. So the title of our lesson here was just, out with Columbus Day, in with Indigenous Peoples Day. It's about time, because up until this year, there was a day celebrating Christopher Columbus discovering America. But again, like Thanksgiving, It's all about perspective, and that finally got replaced by Indigenous Peoples Day, because when you say that the first day of our history starts with Columbus, you're really forgetting what came before that. So this year, President Biden actually made Indigenous Peoples Day an official holiday. Okay, so in this lesson here, just some things that I had in mind when I was doing this. One is, at the beginning of my lessons, I love to give a playlist of some music that you can listen to if you want to get in the mood for the theme that we're talking about. So this one is going to be about Native American music. Some of the music is in the different languages, the tribal languages. Some of the songs are in English, and some are just music. But if you're interested in hearing what Native music sounds like, I have a playlist from Spotify for you. Then we're going to do some Native American quotes and proverbs. Then the Native American 10 Commandments, which are just sort of the words to live by, right? Then I'm going to show you a map maker, a young man who is remaking Native American maps to show them from the perspective of Native people. Then some more maps to get us thinking. So we're going to look at a couple of interesting maps of the United States, especially the movement of Indigenous peoples there. And then I'm going to introduce you to our United States Poet Laureate, Jo Hario, and we'll read a poem by her and look at the project that she is famous for, which is mapping Native American poets, and then we'll read one more poem. So that's what I've got on our list for today. So I'll just show you what the playlist looks like. When you look at any of the lessons that we send you at the end, they always have a playlist. You can just click on this, the link is inside, and you can listen to the music. It's kind of nice background music, but it gives you, I think music is always a nice window into different cultures. So I'm going to start with these quotes here. I love the first one, which is a Comanche one, which says, "The most American thing about America is American Indians." I'll go through a couple more of them with you. "They are not dead who live in the hearts they leave behind." Okay, Tuscarora. Then we have, you can read with me if you like. If you want to practice, I'll make them a little bit bigger for you. "All plants are our brothers and sisters. They talk to us, and if we listen, we can hear them." Okay, so we're getting a little bit of an idea into the philosophy of Native American thought, right? That nature and is part of the, everybody's part of the universe, right? And where plants and animals are to be respected. So we're going to get more into that even here. We can see it. "Day and night cannot dwell together," meaning live together. So using nature to explain things in our regular lives as well. "It's better to have less thunder, in the mouth and more lightning in the hand," which to me looks like words don't have very much meaning, but you've got to do action, right? But I also love these quotes because of how they use nature. Then we have, this one is a repeat. Sorry about that. Also, though, it looks like I had a problem with copying and pasting. I did it twice. Oops. "When we show our respect for other living things, they respond with respect for us. If we wonder often, the gift of knowledge will come," right? So being curious. "Most of us do not look as handsome to others as we do to ourselves." And this is my favorite one by Blackfoot. "Those that lie down with dogs get up with fleas." Do you know what fleas are? Fleas are pulchi, those little bugs that. So if you're keeping bad company, you're going to wake up with the fleas. "In age talk, in childhood tears." This is a Hopi proverb. And then this is another one that's a big popular one with my students, which is, "We always return to our first loves." Okay, another Blackfoot one is here. "What is life? It is the flash of a firefly in the night. It's the breath of a buffalo in the wintertime. It is the little shadow which runs across the grass and loses itself in the sunset. Isn't that nice? This is a good one too. Some of them are kind of funny. Those who have one foot in the canoe and a canoe is the long boat that we see, right? That with the oars that you row, right, in the water. If you have one foot in the canoe and one foot in the boat, you're going to fall into the river. And then we're going to talk about the Cherokee a little bit today. The weakness of the enemy makes our strength. This one's a kind of funny, sexist one. When the white man discovered this country, Indians were running it. No taxes, no debt. Women did all the work. White man thought he could improve on a system like this. Okay. And then this last one here, I'm going to just highlight to you because this is something that's happening in culture today. It says, do not judge your neighbor until you walk 2 moons in his moccasins. So moccasins are the traditional shoes of the Native Americans. Maybe you've seen them. Some of them are very intricately designed with beautiful beads. And right now, because this month celebrates Native American culture in America, they have on Instagram, if you do a search for rock your mocks, as in your moccasins, in fact, I'll put it, if you go to you will see people are taking selfies of themselves with their very beautiful traditional moccasins. Some of them are simple, some of them are really incredibly beautiful, some of them are worth thousands of dollars, and some are simpler. But if you have Instagram, it's worth looking at what people are sharing. There's some really amazing photos of people sharing their moccasins from their families. Sometimes they're passed down. Sometimes you have traditional ritual ones. So it's really fun to look at those. Like I have it on my Instagram feed and I check it every day to see what comes up. So I always put the source of my quotes. The Native American 10 Commandments look something like this. Treat the earth and all that dwell is another word for to live. Okay, it's a little bit formal. So you see the word dwell when you look in the Bible and places like that. So it's kind of an old word. It's a formal word to mean to live. Okay, so treat the earth and all that dwell therein, everything, everybody, and everything that lives on the earth with respect. Remain close to the Great Spirit. The Great Spirit, of course, would be the version of God. Show great respect for your fellow beings, meaning the other people around you. Work together for the benefit of all mankind. Give assistance and kindness wherever needed. Do what you know to be right. Look after the well-being of mind and body. Dedicate a share of your efforts to the greater good. Be truthful and honest at all times. Take full responsibility for your actions. I think, what if we all lived according to these commandments? Wouldn't things be a little bit better? We'd be in better shape right now with the climate. We'd be less divided, but these are the sort of the main tenets that we find in many. Obviously, there are many different tribes of, and also that even within tribes, there are many different groups of people. We can't say everybody believes the same thing, but these seem to be the concepts that we see repeated in different Native American culture. Now, I want to call your attention to this man who is Aaron Carapella is his name. And there's also a link here where you can actually go and listen to the story as well. So you can read it and you can listen to it. But I want to show you what he's done. He's a young person who decided that it was time to create a new kind of map. Let me just read you what's here. It says, as a teenager, Carapella says he could never get his hands on a US map like this, depicting more than 600 tribes, many now forgotten and lost to history. Now, the 34-year-old designs and sells maps as large as 3 by 4 feet, that's pretty big, with the names of tribes hovering over the land they once occupied. Now, what's interesting is if you look at the map, I don't know how well you can see this. I'll try to make it a little bit bigger. The title of it is, let's see, I don't know, I have to move things around here. The title is Tribal Nations Map, Our Own Names and Locations. So look at the names here. If you look closely, I'm just gonna, oops. Do you see any names that you recognize? Probably not, because these are the tribal names. These are the actual names of the tribes. Many of them are extinct. Of course, many of these tribes were completely desecrated by the American settlers, either by disease. There's a great depopulation because the white people brought sickness and disease that the native people were not able to handle, but then also they were killed in many cases for their land. But if you look at the names of these, Nakota sounds a little bit like Dakota, so we can imagine that they're probably related. There's Dakotas also, okay, so that's there. Dakota, then Lakota, this is that whole area. So these are names that maybe we still know, but Ho-Chunk, we know that. But many of the names that of the tribes that we know that are the popular names were actually given by white people, not by the natives themselves. And so what this map is meant to be is kind of taking back the land and showing, first of all, oops, that this is the entire, now I'm making it smaller so you can see the whole country. This is, of course, Canada up here. This is the continental United States, this area here, this is my state here. But what I think it's interesting to look at is how much land the Native Americans actually covered, and that there really were 600 different tribes. Okay, so if you look at the map and you see it goes all the way down to Florida, this is of course Texas, you've got California over here. So, this is the same map that we're used to seeing now, but with wherever this guy, he went through archives and he went visiting the different states, looking for tribal leaders and gathering all the information he could. And then he started making this map with the original names and the areas that these tribes covered, or what he could understand they covered, taking into account the archival materials that he found and the interviews that he did with tribal leaders. So that's his American map. Then we see this is the Central American map. So what he's doing is he's going down into Mexico, into Central America, and so he's just keeps continuing his work, and now he's working on Alaska, okay, which is also was also populated by Native American tribes as well. So for many of us, this is a new way of looking at indigenous people. Say, wow, look at how many tribes, look at how many names, how many differences. This is all sort of new information that's being compiled by this young man. It's also interesting, even the word Indian, was not a word that was given to the Native Americans on the, they didn't consider themselves Indians. They weren't from India, right? So even the idea of naming, when it's white people have kind of use their power to give names to people that weren't always very friendly. In fact, he says that some Native American groups got stuck with names chosen arbitrarily by European settlers. They were often derogatory, names that other tribes used to describe their rivals. For example, Comanche, which we, have always heard as a tribe, is derived from a word in Ute, okay, meaning anyone who wants to fight me all the time. So obviously that was by another group saying, oh, call them that, right? So you can imagine if your entire population was given a name that was just the worst, most derogatory name you could have. So in America, we'd say it's like having a map of North America where the United States is labeled gringos, which is what Latino Americans call white people, and Mexico is labeled wetbacks, which again is a pejorative term for people living in Mexico. So naming is power. And so in remaking a map and putting on the original names, you're also in some way taking back your power, okay? So even the fact that I'm talking about Native Americans feels a little bit wrong to me since I don't have all the information. All I can do is share with you my own curiosity about finding out more from Native American peoples themselves, okay? So he ends his article here by saying this isn't really a protest because he's an activist, but he says it's a way to convey the truth in a different way, okay? Now, if we're talking about other maps, we can also look at this map, which shows, I don't know if you can see it moving here, but the green area is the Native American population. And up here, we have the years. So we start out, this is how many are there now, based on lances. So this is at the beginning, this is where all the Native Americans were. And then the green, you can see that the Native peoples are being pushed towards the west and eventually just on small reservations. And now, okay, so you have to look at it a few times to get the idea, but you get the idea. So from covering the entire country to just being sparsely put in these small areas, mainly tricked, their land was stolen from them. They were promised things they were never given, and until finally, basically, an ethnic cleansing that left us with very, very few Native Americans left in America. Now, we know now that the US was built on the theft of Native American lands. America was a valuable place. There was a lot of raw materials that the Americans were interested in having, and it was not in their best interest to allow Native people to keep their land. Native people who weren't in the habit of buying and selling land because they saw the land as belonging to everyone. The white people didn't see it that way, and so did everything they could to kind of carefully take away that land. And if they could use the Native Americans, they did. And then if they couldn't, they basically killed them. Okay, so there's another map. It's a little bit very sad, which is called the Trail of Tears. Okay, the Trail of Tears refers to an act of ethnic cleansing, again, that was actually authorized by the president of the time in 1830. It was called, it was Andrew Jackson, I believe, was the president. And it was called the Indian Removal Act, okay? And this was an act, a law, that said that it was okay to move Native American tribes from the south, okay, which was land that people wanted, and move them west. Because if you moved people west to the Western territories, that was sort of the Wild West. We call it the Wild West because it wasn't, if you could send people that way, we don't want to go there yet because we don't even know what's there. But we do want this stuff here. So that was the Trail of Tears, refers to the people having to walk away from their lands. And in fact, they say in many places in Oklahoma, et cetera, that where the tears fell, roses grew, for example, like little sand roses and things. So there's a lot of lore, many stories about the Trail of Tears, but in the end, you can see here on this map the different tribes that were present there, the bigger tribes, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole, where they were relocated to, and basically so that their land could be used by white people and farmed, et cetera. So it's part of, this is just one example, but of the many examples of moving the populations to other places, moving them far away, but then, gradually taking away that land, making it smaller and smaller until we get to the sizes that we have now. Okay. So it says the largest act, I'll let you read with me, of ethnic cleansing perpetrated by the United States government began in 1830 when Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act into law. By the way, I should state that when people asked President Trump who his favorite president was, he always says Andrew Jackson. I don't think it's I don't think it's by accident. I think there are a lot of things about Andrew Jackson that Donald Trump liked, including his disdain for people who were different than him. So interesting. So the Indian Removal Act, which gave him the power to negotiate the removal of Native American tribes in the South to land west of the Mississippi. You know that St. Louis, if you've heard of St. Louis, have you ever seen the Arch of St. Louis, Missouri? That was called the Gateway to the West, because anything to the west of the Mississippi River at that time was just considered the West. Now we call it the Midwest because it's not that west, now that we have California settled and everything else. But at that point, those were places that were kind of like, ooh, that scary place over there. The Cherokee, they lost their land because of a treaty that was never even actually approved by the Cherokee Nation, by their leaders, because the idea was that the American government would make agreements with the tribal leaders. It was supposed to look like it was something fair, but many times the U.S. government would actually just say, "Oh yeah, it was approved, we promise," and of course it wasn't. Okay. But as a result of that, there were 4,000 deaths, or 1/5 of the Cherokee population disappeared after that, and probably even more. We can't know. Okay, now here we have if you look at this map, if you look at the blue parts, this is the natives, where there's more than 50 to 95% of Native Americans. So you can see now that whereas before they were covering the entire country, now you just see these little pockets, and these little pockets of areas normally coincide with Indian reservations or Native American reservations. Okay. So, and here it says it all right here. America's indigenous population today is sparse and largely lives in areas we forced them into. Okay, so if you read anything about the history of the Native Americans, it's a very sad story that makes, it's something that's hard for Americans to face, but it's something that we need to come to terms with. The fact that it's a terrible, terrible, sad story. Okay. And of course, this article tells you more about the depopulation because of disease and about what was happening with how people were moved around. Okay. But I want to go to a little hopeful note, I guess. This is Jo Hario. Okay. She is the American Poet Laureate. You know that presidents of the United States can choose an official poet. And she's actually been the poet for the last 3 presidents. And she's the first female, or first, she's not the first female, but she is the first Native American female to become the Poet Laureate. And I think what's interesting about her is this project, which is called Living Nations, Living Words, and it's a map of First Peoples. So again, we have a new name for Native Americans. She calls them First Peoples, which I think is really a nice way of referring to indigenous peoples. We were first Americans, not always in terms of what white people want to call them. So I thought we could read this little poem together. Okay. So this poem is called Remember. Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away to night. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth, whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth. Brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them. Listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember, you are all people, and all people are you. Remember, you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember, all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember, language comes from this. Remember, the dance language is, that life is. Remember. Okay, so that's the first one. Then I wanted to have you take a look at her project here, which is Living Nations, Living Words, and there's a link. And it says a map of First Peoples poetry. So again, we have another example of recreating the map. So there's something special or something that's really powerful about creating your map. Okay, now we know that maps traditionally are kind of drawn by who's in power. And I think that these different maps are giving us a second to kind of reconsider our traditional ideas about what those maps represent. So if I look down on the website, you see this even better. You see, this is the United States again, right? But you see all of these little markers here that look like little suns. And what these are these are points on the map where we can find Native American poets. So she's talking about mapping the United States through poetry, because she even says it in her poem, doesn't she? There's a line where she talks about poetry. She says, when you remember your family, their histories, talk to them, listen to them, they are alive poems. So she refers to your ancestors, your parents, your family as being poems. And so here she's mapping poetry. It says, you can begin anywhere. I love that. Each location marker, I'm gonna make this bigger so you can see it, reveals a native nation's poet and features an image, biography, and a link to hear the poet recite and comment on an original poem. This body of work forms the foundation of a Living Nations, Living Words online collection in the Library of Congress's American Folk Life Center. So again, if you do just a Google for it, Living Nations, Living Words, you will see this is just an image in this lesson, but the website is an interactive map where you can put your mouse over it, you can see the picture, you can read the poetry. And I think that poetry is really an appropriate art form for what we're talking about, because it's like a window into culture that is hard to access otherwise, right? And I think poetry gives us a new way of looking at. Also, the nice thing about this map, but also in the mapping process, is giving voices to the people themselves. It's kind of a reclaiming of culture, rather than having white people determine what's valuable, having the native peoples speak their truth. And I think that's the value of all of these mapping projects, but especially of this art and poetry project. So I want to read another poem by Johario, which is for calling the spirit back from wandering the earth in its human feet. I'm just gonna try to, I hope you can see this okay, because I know that there's kind of an echo, but you can read. I'll use my mouse so you can read with me. Put down that bag of potato chips, that white bread, that bottle of pop. Now, pop is like Coca-Cola, right? Last time we were together, we talked about American food, and we talked about how the future of sustainable food will probably be going back to the native way of farming and cooking before the white people. So I think food is also something about identity. So saying put down those potato chips, white bread, bottle of pop, because again, that's all stuff that was brought in later. Turn off that cell phone, computer, and remote control. Open the door, then close it behind you. Take a breath offered by friendly winds. They travel the earth, gathering essences of plants to clean. Give it back with gratitude. Now, gratitude, of course, is important for Thanksgiving, so I point that out. This is the week to be thankful. If you sing, it will give your spirit lift to fly to the stars' ears and back. Acknowledge this earth who has cared for you since you were a dream, planting itself precisely within your parents' desire. Here we have the moccasins again. Remember the rock your mocks? Let your moccasin feet take you to the encampment of the guardians who have known you before time, who will be there after time. I love this too about not having, it's not chronological, right? Everything happens simultaneous, which is like the map she has. You can start anywhere and it all exists at the same time. They sit before the fire that has been there without time. Let the earth stabilize your post-colonial insecure jitters. That's jitters is when you're nervous and shaky. Be respectful of the small insects, birds, and animal people who accompany you. Ask their forgiveness for the harm. Harm is a danno, right? So we're thinking we humans have brought down upon them. So again, asking forgiveness from the earth, from the animals, for what we have done to them. Don't worry. The heart knows the way, though there may be high rises, interstates, which are highways, checkpoints, armed soldiers, massacres, wars, and those who will despise you because they despise themselves. Despise means to hate. The journey might take you a few hours, a day, a year, a few years, 100, 1,000, or even more. Watch your mind. Without training, it might run away and leave your heart for the immense human feast set by the thieves of time. Do not hold regrets. Regret is when you feel sad about something in the past. When you find your way to the circle, to the fire kept burning by the keepers of your soul, you will be welcomed. You must clean yourself with cedar. Cedar is a kind of wood. It's a kind of wood you put in your closet so that the bugs don't come. It's got a very nice smell to it, and it keeps your wool good, right? It's a kind of tree. Sage, you know, is a plant or other healing plant. Cut the ties you have to failure and shame. Let go the pain you're holding in your mind, your shoulders, your heart, all the way to your feet. Let go the pain of your ancestors to make way for those who are heading in our direction. Ask for forgiveness. A little bit more. Call upon the help of those who love you. These helpers take many forms: animal, element, bird, angel, saint, stone, or ancestor. Look at how many helpers we have. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame, judgment, and human abuse. You must call in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would to a beloved child. Welcome your spirit back from its wandering. It may return in pieces, in tatters. Gather them together. They will be happy to be found after being lost for so long. Your spirit will need to sleep a while after it is bathed and given clean clothes. Now you can have a party. Invite everyone you know who loves and supports you. Keep room for those who have no place else to go. Make a giveaway. And remember, keep the speeches short. Then you must do this. Help the next person find their way through the dark. Okay, this is a little long, but I love this idea. The idea of finding your spirit after a long, long sleep, right? So I'm going to end our talk today with, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment because I'm going to find, I want to show you two things just as references. One of them, of course, is Rock Your Mocks. There's a video. There's a page here. I just want to show that to you. Let me see if I can share my screen again with you. Okay, so this is the webpage for Rock Your Mocks, which is a worldwide social media event where people are showing their moccasins to really reclaim their culture. Rock Your Mocks, okay? It's happening between November 14th and November 20th, okay? So just finished, basically. And then it says, do we have to wear a mocks the whole week? No, choose a day, and then what you're going to do is take a photo of it. So I want to see if we can see. There's also a Facebook page that has the pictures. If you have Facebook, you could probably go over there and take a look at what people have shared. So that's one thing I wanted to show you. Then I want to I'm going to stop sharing so I can reshare another page for you. Wait, let me just get there, which is the Living Nations, Living Words. Okay, so you should see this. This is the webpage of the poet laureate, Jo Hario. We read her poems today. And I just want to show you her map. So her map has these different places. Like you can click on one of the images and it'll have the image of the poet, and it will have a poem that you can listen to and that poet's comment about it. So I'm going to look at Wisconsin here, see if I can, oh, from Chicago. So this woman is from not far from my house. And you can listen to that, okay? So this is the map that I hope you'll take a moment to look at to get some more information. Again, the important thing here is to stop sharing, is to just stay curious and try wherever we can to get information directly from the people so we can learn more about their experience, okay? So that's what I have for you today. Do you have any questions? I don't know if I can answer them, but if you have any questions or comments, we have a minute if you'd like.
I would like to say a couple of things. Okay, first, we spoke about President Jackson, the American colonization, and so on. But it is to understand the things is very important to look at the differences and comparisons, no?
Differences
and to compare sure. With other situations, etc. In 19th century, and even before wars, it was not only America and United States who worked so, all the world worked so, with the kind and bold violence of civilization.
Sure.
North America, South America, Africa, China, in the middle of Africa, in the 13th century, 15th century, and 19th century, there was cannibalism and slavery among the black people without the white people. The world was so, no? And what happened in America with the Indians happened similarly all around the world in every situation. Maybe with more violence, because anyway, in America in the 19th century, there was a little democratic check, a little. In China, a little democratic check.
Okay,
And
sure.
in China, not sure, sure not. Sure not. Or in Africa or in India, I don't know. For example, the Spaniards conquered South America. And for the Indians in South America, it was even worse, of course, no? But it's interesting to see why 10, 20 conquistadores conquered a continent. There were 50 people, 100 people in conquistadores. Why? Destroyed civilization like Aztec, Maya, and so on. Because that civilization were developed, the pyramids, you know, no? But they were so violent, so terrible, that the ordinary people didn't love the priests and the imperators and so on, didn't love their own. And for the ordinary people, the conquistadores were only people were maybe better than their own kings or imperator, because they were so violent. You know, the Aztec civilization of the India, Maya, and so on, there were bad violence, total violence against the ordinary people. There were the priests, and they ruled with total violence. In this situation, it was easy for the Spaniards with 200 people and 50 rifles to conquest everything. No, the world is always about survival. It's not an issue of President Jackson or Buffalo Bill. No.
Sure.
Then Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus was not a nice guy. I studied it in Italian school, in the elementary school. He died in jail because of barbary and manslaughter. Yeah, we know this, no? But anyway, he organized an expedition that anyway changed completely the world. And this is the issue. Then he was not a nice guy. He had a lot of his big family with barbarism, with nepotism. We treated so badly sometimes the Indians that even the Spaniard imperator, the Spaniard king said, be quiet, please, not so hard. This is I studied it in Italian school 30 years, 40 years ago. It is not a new thing. But anyway, we Italians say, anyway, Christopher Columbus changed dramatically the world. And in this outlook, is extremely important. Do you agree?
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting to look at these things in a different context, right? Because you're placing it in a bigger context.
Yeah.
And yeah, we could talk about this stuff all day, couldn't we? There's a lot to say.
Okay, this is not in America anyway. Even during the Indians War, there was a strange democratic control that didn't exist in the other places. But it was another time. It was not that way, you know. There were the journalists, the polemic, and the laws. You have to. It was different. It was not so in Brazil, sure.
Well, right. And in fact, I don't, when we talk about
China, you can imagine what happened in China in the 17th century, in the middle of China. They killed probably 1 million people and nobody took care. No,
right.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share anything?
Was my English clear?
Fantastic. Very clear. Good. Well, if there are no more questions, I think we can leave it at that. Thank you for your attention, and we'll see you soon, I think, right?
In person.
Next one in December.
In person.
In person, finally, back together again. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.